Hi, welcome to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. It's Sunday, February 22nd, and I'm Jessica Steinberg. I'm speaking today with military correspondent Emanuel Fabian. Hey, Manny. Good morning. How are you?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Shavua Tov. We have reports that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have taken charge of Hezbollah in advance of a possible strike or back and forth with Iran. We'll discuss the latest regarding that terror group in Lebanon, updates on the situation with Iran, where we seem to stand right now, and what's been happening in Gaza at the end of last week. So stay with us.
מההתחלה.
בשם השף נעשה ונצליח.
אתם הטבחים חושבים שאתם מחזיקים את העולם בביצים. זה לא טוב לך מה שאתה עושה. מה אתה יודע מה טוב לי, מה לא טוב לי? סרוויס! לא יוצאת לי ממש. שקרן. מה את רוצה ממני? חי.
Okay, so Manny, here's what we have on the top of our page right now, and I know that you're working on a longer piece about this situation. So the Iranian Guard Corps, some of whom reportedly recently arrived in Lebanon from Iran, are supposedly tasked with rebuilding Hezbollah's military capabilities, which of course were severely depleted following the year-long war with Israel that started right after October 7th, 2023. So again, according to these reports, these Iranian officers are briefing Hezbollah operatives across Lebanon. We, of course, had there was a very serious Israeli strike on Friday. Tell us where we are on all of this. Give us basically a little bit of a preview of what you're going to be writing up today about this situation and what it really looks like from your perspective.
We know, of course, the last year, since the November ceasefire in Lebanon, Israel's been consistently conducting strikes against Hezbollah, working to prevent it from rebuilding up its forces. But the last few weeks have seen, I would say, a bit of an uptick in these strikes, and specifically targeting Hezbollah's rocket and missile forces. Now, the strike we saw on Friday night targeted 3 command centers belonging to Hezbollah's missile force. And this comes amid these assessments that Hezbollah may join Iran in an attack on Israel if the US attacks Iran and then Iran wants to respond against Israel as well. There's the assessment that Hezbollah will also join, and this is something that Iran has reportedly been pushing for as well, because it wants to be able to respond with all of its regional proxies, not just Hezbollah but others as well. So in recent weeks, the army has identified efforts by Hezbollah to sort of put together its missile forces for an attack on Israel. And the strike, indeed on Friday night, the army said that Hezbollah's missile forces was planning rocket fire on Israel. It was working on those plans. And the strike... Currently, yeah, they said currently working on planning rocket attacks on Israel. And this comes, in the backdrop of these tensions with Iran. Interestingly, the strike killed a relatively high number of members of Hezbollah. Hezbollah announced the deaths of 8 operatives, including a senior commander. They identified him as a commander, which Hezbollah rarely does. It really saves that designation only for the top members of the terror group. And we've seen in the last few weeks, since the beginning of the month, I've counted several other strikes that Israel has launched on Hezbollah that specifically went for Hezbollah's rocket and missile capabilities, along with the general strikes against Hezbollah operatives working on restoring their capabilities. But there is a bit of a focus now on the missile forces of Hezbollah because of this assessment that it may join Iran in an attack on Israel if there is a new conflict, of course.
Manny, what about these reports, which obviously were not coming from the IDF? What about these reports that there are these senior Iranian officers in Lebanon working to build up the capabilities of Hezbollah against Israel?
It's not particularly surprising, and I believe it to be true, because we've seen in the past year or so while Israel's working on degrading Hezbollah's capabilities, Iran is working on supporting them. They've sent them money, millions of dollars in funding to try and help restore their capabilities. It's more difficult for Hezbollah now because they don't have that route through Syria anymore with the Assad regime gone. There is a lot of effort by Iran, and this isn't a secret or anything, by Iran to restore its proxy group that was heavily damaged by Israel during the war, at sort of at the beginning of the war and when the conflict sort of expanded. IRGC officials in Lebanon working on training Hezbollah, not surprising,
No shock.
not a big shock. And it's, I'm sure, something that Israel is looking at and monitoring as well.
Anticipating even.
And there's we don't know exactly if any of these IGC officers were actually killed in the strike on Friday night, because Lebanon reported that 10 people were killed and Hezbollah identified 8 of them as operatives. So the other 2, they could be civilians, or they could have been possibly these IGC operatives. We don't really know those details yet, but them being there and working with Hezbollah to try and restore their capabilities, or even directing them, or as the report claimed, has essentially taken over the terror group. That does sort of align with the Israeli assessments that Iran is pushing Hezbollah to join a potential conflict against Israel.
And then one last question on this issue: what about Hezbollah's capabilities? Obviously, we've been talking about this for months. The ceasefire is now well over a year old. What do you know about that? What can you sort of inform us on that?
So Hezbollah still possesses thousands of rockets. The war ended not with Hezbollah defeated or anything. It ended with a ceasefire. So we shouldn't really assume that Hezbollah is completely out of the game. They have capabilities. They can still launch rockets at Israel. They can reach Tel Aviv and beyond. That's something that Israel should expect. But they are, heavily degraded in some ways, where before the war they had hundreds of thousands of rockets, mostly short range, and thousands and thousands of long range rockets. They're down to hundreds of those very long range rockets and only thousands of the medium and short range ones. But they still have the capabilities. It's not all gone. The main, I think, part of Hezbollah that was very badly damaged and degraded by Israel during the fighting was the threat of its invasion, the Radwan force that was planning on invading the Galilee. Israel essentially decimated the entire leadership of the Radwan force, pushed all of its operatives back. Israel controls South Lebanon, but the 5 points that it still is, the army still deployed in South Lebanon. So the threat of an invasion is essentially removed, at least the army believes, but the rocket fire and especially missiles that can be launched from deeper within Lebanon, that's not something that Israel is able to really reach and prevent. So the rocket and missile capabilities are still there, the invasion less so, and Hezbollah also has drones that it could launch at Israel, and that it did launch during the fighting in 2023-2024. So that's the kind of capabilities that we should expect from Hezbollah if there is a new conflict and they join. But it's important to also stress that Israel has air defense systems. It's well experienced with it. It shot down thousands of Hezbollah rockets and drones during the fighting. Israel's learned a lot from the war. So it's not like Israel doesn't know how to really deal with this sort of threat.
Right. Certainly right. We certainly saw that over 2 years ago. Okay, what about Iran? Obviously, there's a lot on the diplomatic front right now that we keep on hearing, but, there's also this wording that we certainly have about sliding toward a military conflict. It's, I don't think there has been a podcast that we haven't spoken about it. Maybe one or two. Yeah. What are you looking at today? What are you thinking about? What are you hearing?
So the U.S. is the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, has moved into the Mediterranean and moved in on Friday past the Strait of Gibraltar. It's expected within a couple days to reach the Middle East area, be able to basically be poised to operate against Iran. And we've heard also Trump say that he was considering maybe a limited strike on Iran to try and pressure it into a deal. I think that's something that we should be looking out for in the coming days. Potentially that, he orders a more limited strike rather than something wider. But really, I want to talk about what's happening in Israel. Is that the Israeli army is on alert. That's the bottom line of it. It doesn't matter if it's a major strike or a more limited one. The IDF on Friday, the IDF spokesperson said that the IDF is on high alert. It's looking in all directions, not just to Iran, but also, of course, to Hezbollah in the north and other fronts. And it's prepared. It's been carrying out preparations since January, since Trump initially threatened military action against Iran. This isn't just, it's in all sort of aspects of the military, the home front command being able to prepare to respond to missile impacts, the air defenses, the intelligence, attack plans as well, if Israel was to join the US in strikes against Iran. So all aspects of the army are basically prepared for some sort of scenario like this, and the military is still on high alert. But alongside all of that, there is no changes yet to the guidelines to the Israeli public. So nobody needs to sort of worry at this point. The home front command hasn't changed anything. You can go about your lives. And if there is something, then Israel hopes to have sort of ample time to notify civilians, like it did previously in the previous Iranian attacks on Israel. Civilians were given relatively enough time to basically prepare and to deal with it and go to the shelter or whatever other preparations they need to do. So Israel's hoping, of course, that if the US does decide to launch an attack on Iran, that it is notified slightly beforehand in order to actually get everything ready and be prepared. But the military has been on high alert and will, I think, remain on high alert until things become more clear.
Yeah, certainly seems that. I think one of the things people are most worried about is if they are traveling for work or pleasure, and a replay of that June, the 12-day war in June, where you're kind of stranded because airlines were not flying in and out of Israel. That's a big one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know people who are stranded abroad during that war, and that's something that's definitely hard to avoid.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's take a quick break. When we're back, we're going to talk about a particular group of people of far-right settlers who drove into Gaza, and what they were doing and what that really says about the current situation. So stay with us.
While Israeli reservists were serving, the financial reality at home began to change. Salaries were reduced or lost, businesses were forced to pause, expenses continued to pile up. That's why Letet has created a dedicated relief fund for families of reservists facing financial hardship because of the war. Over the next 6 months, Letet will provide monthly food and hygiene assistance to help families regain stability and return to everyday life. These families stood for all of us. Now it's our time to stand with them. Donate today.
Okay, so this is Thursday evening. Dozens of settler activists, among them the far-right MK Knesset member Limor Son Har-Melech, illegally breached the Gaza Strip on Thursday evening. That prompted the IDF to send troops after them. They were crossing with cars, planted trees, basically part of this sort of splinter group that is looking to reestablish settlements in the Gaza Strip, Jewish settlements. What can you tell us, obviously, from the IDF's perspective on this? When did this unfold, and the timing, and how that all sort of followed through?
Right. So it's important to note that the Gaza border is a closed military zone, right? You're not supposed to be entering that area. But this isn't the first time this sort of thing has happened, and I don't think it will be the last either. The issue is that the IDF controls 50% of Gaza, right? It's deployed within the strip at all of these outposts that are inside Gaza, and therefore the actual fence itself, which is in Israeli territory, is, I would say, not really protected because
is accessible. Actually, Manny, could you give a little bit of a description of what this could have looked like? Where were they essentially coming from?
So as far as I understand, they approached the Israeli border. It's very easy to do. Anyone can drive there. No one's going to really stop you. At the beginning of the war, there was military police everywhere over the border, and they even as a journalist trying to reach there, they would stop me and ask me questions and prevent me from going. but now it's pretty much open, and you can just drive up to the border in many cases, and nobody will stop you. And there's, I don't want to say holes in the fence, but there's definitely big open accesses. Not the ones that Hamas knocked down. Those are all repaired, but there's gates in the fence that the army uses for, its convoys to go in and out all the time. There are guards and soldiers there protecting them, but there's a lot of them that aren't really well protected, not at all times during the day. And it's mainly because the army's inside Gaza. The IDF is there to prevent people from coming into Israel. It's there to defend against Hamas terrorists trying to infiltrate and carry out attacks. Less so with people trying to go in, because that's where the focus is. And therefore, these activists managed to drive into Gaza through one of these open gates. There was also a video of them in another section of the gate of the border fence trying to sort of breach it using like a saw to try and like actually physically damage the fence, which is a crazy thing to do, because it's a fence meant to sort of defend against Hamas attacks, and they're trying to breach it.
Right, and they're just trying to destroy it.
The army sent troops. It had to run after them in Gaza a little bit. Most of them exited on their own, as far as I understand. But some were detained and then handed over to the police for further questioning.
But they were trying to plant trees, so
they didn't go
were
so
they there
far
for
deep
a
in.
bit? Were they there for what was the timing?
As far as I understand, they were there for a short while, maybe under an hour or around that. Usually the army is very quick to get them out, but it's at night. It takes time to send the forces to those areas, and they have to then leave whatever else they're doing. Normally these troops are doing defensive missions inside Gaza, making sure no one's approaching from the strip, and then they have to run back and start to deal with Israelis who are running around inside Gaza. They didn't get very far into the strip, obviously, only a few hundred meters probably, as far as I understand. But still, it completely diverts the army's attention away from what it's supposed to be doing, which is defending against potential attacks from Gaza, and they have to run around and deal with these activists. I'll just add, there were lots of young children there as well. It was dozens of them, families, and it was like a whole outing and everything. But it's
Right. I mean, they're reportedly, this was from the reporting that we have, that they're preparing for a giant march during Passover. And presumably might be a buildup of these kinds of events where the army will keep on having to divert their attention to deal with.
Yeah, in the cases where they know ahead of time, and we've seen other ones, then it's a bit easier, and also they get the police involved as well and have them already deployed to the border to sort of prevent this sort of thing. But it's definitely just a problem that the army now has to deal with them crossing the.
Have there been other instances? I know there have been other instances of this, but have there been other instances that haven't necessarily been reported?
No, we've reported on these cases. The army, this happens all the time. Especially on the Gaza border, it's happened. But if you want to add as well, then also it's happened on the border with Syria and Lebanon as well, in recent weeks as well, by the same sort of fringe groups of activists who are promoting Israeli settlements in Lebanon and in Syria. They've crossed the border. In some cases, they've damaged the border fence to try and breach in. And
they stole herds.
Right, that was another case. They stole sheep, apparently, in Syria in one case. And the army needs to chase after them and deal with all this sort of thing. And you sort of ask, why does this keep happening? Why is the army not preventing it? It's because the army's looking the other direction. It's looking towards Lebanon, towards Syria, towards Gaza, and not towards Israeli territory.
Not anticipating.
Exactly. It doesn't. It's not there to. If the army had infinite amount of forces, then it would deploy more there and prevent people from also entering these closed military zones. But that's not really the priority for the military. It should really fall on the police if they want to enforce that sort of thing. But it is, of course, illegal to enter closed military zones. It's unlikely that we'll see anybody charged in these cases, because it'll just. I don't think they'll charge anybody. Yeah,
right.
They haven't, I don't think, charged anyone for going into Lebanon or Syria as well in those other similar cases. But the army really it condemned this incident, and it said that it really endangers the civilians themselves, but also the troops, that they have to now run around after civilians in Gaza at night and deal with this instead of what they're supposed to be dealing with.
Okay, we're going to let you get to it. Thank you for being on today's Daily Briefing. It's been good to see you and to have you here.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening to today's Daily Briefing. Stay tuned for tomorrow's installment. This episode is produced by Ari Schlacht. As always, feel free to recommend us to other listeners and find us wherever you find your podcasts. Till next time, take care, be well, Shavua Tov.